I came home to find my clothes folded on the couch and my wife's voice colder than the November air outside. "Think about how you treat my brother," she said, standing in the doorway, arms crossed, eyes sharp enough to cut glass. That's when I knew something had shifted in our house, something I wasn't sure I could fix. My name is Ryan Carter, 38, operations manager at a logistics firm in Denver. I've been married to Melissa for 9 years. We've built a quiet, predictable life, steady jobs, a modest house, 2 cars, no kids. We used to be a team, but lately, it felt like we were sharing a roof, not a life. It started 6 months ago when her younger brother, Kyle, moved in temporarily. He'd lost his job, again, and Melissa didn't want him sleeping in his car. I didn't argue. Family helps family, right? But temporary turned into indefinite, and Kyle turned into a tenant who paid nothing and acted like he owned the place. He'd sleep until noon, leave dirty dishes in the sink, take long showers that doubled our water bill, and somehow managed to burn through more electricity than a data center. When I brought it up to Melissa, she brushed it off. "He's just getting back on his feet," she'd say. Except he wasn't. Last Thursday, I checked our credit card statement and saw grocery charges that didn't add up. Kyle had been using our card for food deliveries, $200 in a week, all charged to me. I didn't lose my temper. I just waited for him to come home. When he stumbled in around 9 p.m., I told him flatly, "If you want to keep living here, you need to cut your expenses and start paying something toward the bills. This isn't a hotel." He laughed, actually laughed. "Melissa said you're fine with me staying until I find something. You're seriously counting dollars now?" I didn't answer him, just walked away, grabbed my jacket, and went out for a drive to clear my head. When I came back 2 hours later, the couch was my new bedroom. Melissa didn't yell. She didn't cry, just stood there, cold and composed. "You humiliated him," she said. "You don't talk to my brother that way." Then she turned and went upstairs. I sat on that couch all night, staring at the ceiling fan spinning slow circles, realizing I wasn't angry anymore, just focused. Because when someone shows you what they value, you start making plans. Quiet ones. By morning, I had a list in my head. Not of things to say, but of things to do. When I woke up the next morning, Melissa was already gone. She'd left early for work, like nothing had happened. The couch cushions still smelled faintly of her perfume, but the space beside me was cold. On the kitchen counter sat a note. "We'll talk tonight. Don't make things worse." No heart, no name, just a warning written in her neat handwriting. I poured myself some coffee and looked around. Kyle's sneakers were tossed by the door, his gaming headset on the table, half a pizza box open beside it. He wasn't up yet. He never was before noon. I stared at that mess for a while before heading to my office upstairs. I had meetings to run, spreadsheets to review, but all I could think about was how I'd lost control of my own home. At lunch, I checked our joint account. Another withdrawal, $120, labeled miscellaneous. I knew that label. Kyle again. It wasn't about the money. It was about the principle. The quiet disrespect of someone who takes and never considers the cost. I started keeping track, line by line, screenshot by screenshot. Every transaction. Every bill that didn't make sense. When Melissa got home that evening, she didn't look at me. She went straight upstairs, called out that she wasn't hungry. I heard her on the phone later, her voice soft and angry. I caught fragments. "He doesn't understand. He embarrassed you. He needs to calm down." She wasn't talking to a friend. She was talking to her brother. That night, I didn't try to argue. I didn't go upstairs. I stayed at the kitchen table, writing down numbers, connecting dots. I realized something then. The house wasn't divided between husband and wife anymore. It was divided between loyalty and convenience. She wasn't protecting Kyle because he needed help. She was protecting him because she needed to believe her family was still worth defending, even at my expense. By midnight, I'd made a plan. I opened a separate account in my name only, rerouted my paycheck, quietly froze the joint card she kept giving her brother. I wasn't trying to hurt her. I was protecting myself. The next morning, Kyle came downstairs yawning, asking if I'd seen his breakfast order confirmation. I told him calmly that the card was closed. His smile faded. He muttered something about control issues and walked away. I didn't respond, just watched him go. Some lessons don't need words. They need time and silence. By the third day, the silence in our house had turned into something heavy, like static before a storm. Melissa barely spoke to me, moving through the rooms like a ghost. Kyle avoided eye contact altogether, though I could feel his resentment in every slammed cabinet and every door left open just to irritate me. That was fine. I'd lived through worse than passive aggression. At work, I focused harder than usual. My team noticed, though no one said anything. I stayed late, sent emails long after midnight. There was a strange calm in burying myself in structure and numbers. Numbers don't lie. People do. When I came home Friday night, Melissa was waiting in the kitchen. She said they'd talked about boundaries. Her brother had apparently confessed that I'd made him feel unwelcome, that I was trying to push him out. She stood there, arms folded, telling me that family should help family. I told her that help had become dependence, and dependence had turned into entitlement. She didn't answer. She just walked away. That night, I didn't argue. I didn't follow her upstairs. I sat in the dark living room, looking at the reflection of our house in the black TV screen, a reflection of everything we used to be. The next morning, I woke early and drove to the bank. I opened a small safe deposit box. Inside, I placed a folder labeled House. Mortgage documents, deed copies, insurance records, all the essentials. I'd learned something important. Before a storm hits, you secure what matters. By the time I came home, Kyle was on the couch playing video games, still wearing the same clothes as yesterday. I said nothing. He didn't even look up. Melissa wasn't there. I checked the shared calendar on her laptop. She'd gone to brunch with her mother. That told me enough. She was building her defense, story by story, just like her brother. That evening, I sent myself an email with attachments, scans of everything I'd collected so far. Expenses, charges, timestamps. Proof that this wasn't about family drama. It was about one man being used in his own home. I wasn't angry anymore. Not even hurt. Just clear. The next phase wouldn't involve words. It would involve structure, timing, and precision. Some people shout to be heard. Others wait for silence, because that's when the real message lands. Sunday morning felt strangely peaceful. Melissa was still asleep, and Kyle hadn't come home from wherever he'd gone the night before. For the first time in weeks, the house was quiet enough that I could hear my own thoughts. I brewed coffee and sat at the kitchen table, watching sunlight crawl across the floor. It was almost beautiful, until I noticed the unopened mail piled by the door. Among the bills was a letter from our internet provider. The balance was double what it should have been. When I logged into the account, I found a subscription Kyle had added, premium sports channels, gaming packages, and a streaming upgrade. My name was on the account, but the charges were his. It wasn't just freeloading anymore. It was theft disguised as laziness. I didn't say a word to Melissa when she came downstairs. She moved around the kitchen in silence, making herself breakfast, scrolling through her phone. When she finally spoke, it wasn't to ask how I was. It was to say she'd invited her brother's friend to stay for a few days. He'd fallen on hard times, apparently. Something inside me clicked. Not loud, just final. That afternoon, while she was at the grocery store, I went through the house methodically. I took pictures of every room, our furniture, electronics, appliances. I documented serial numbers and receipts, then stored everything in a folder labeled Inventory. I wasn't preparing for a confrontation. I was preparing for consequences. When Melissa came back, I was calm. She looked at me suspiciously, asking if I was still upset. I told her I wasn't upset at all. I told her I was thinking clearly for the first time in months. She didn't know what that meant, and I didn't explain. Later that night, Kyle came home with bags of takeout and his new friend, a guy named Trevor. They were laughing loudly, smelling of beer and cheap cologne. I didn't say a word. I watched them eat, leave the trash on the counter, and disappear into the living room. Melissa didn't stop them. I went upstairs, opened my laptop, and began transferring copies of every important file to a private cloud folder. Mortgage, insurance, tax records, everything. I wasn't planning revenge. I was building proof. Because when everything collapses, only the quiet one with evidence gets to decide what happens next. By midweek, the house didn't feel like mine anymore. I'd come home from work and find strangers in the living room, empty beer cans on the counter, and Kyle pretending not to notice the look on my face. Melissa had stopped asking me about my day. She'd started defending every bit of chaos with the same line, "It's just temporary." Temporary had become permanent, and I was the outsider in my own home. But I didn't argue. I watched. I noted patterns. Kyle's job hunt was nothing but video games and daytime naps. Melissa's excuses for him sounded rehearsed, like she was repeating someone else's script. The woman I'd married was disappearing behind someone else's problems. On Thursday night, I came home to find my laptop moved from the office. When I opened it, my password didn't work. Someone had changed it. I checked the browser history from another device and found searches for loan applications, our names, our address. It wasn't Kyle's level of thinking. That was Melissa's handwriting in digital form. That's when I realized this wasn't carelessness anymore. It was planning. I didn't confront her. I knew emotion wouldn't win this. I made copies of the browser logs, then reset everything through my company's secured access. If someone wanted to use my name, they'd find locked doors everywhere they turned. Friday morning, I left early. On my way to work, I stopped by the local police department. I asked a simple question: what documentation is needed to file a financial fraud report if someone opens credit in your name? The officer gave me a checklist. I folded it neatly and put it in my wallet. No one needed to know about that visit but me. That night, Melissa mentioned that Kyle had finally found a business opportunity. She said it like it was good news. I asked what kind. She said he'd rather explain it himself. When he did, it was some online resale scheme that required startup funds. He looked at me expectantly, waiting for approval or money. I gave neither. Instead, I told him something else, quietly. I said that everything he did from now on would be tracked. Every purchase, every withdrawal, every login. He laughed at first, but then saw that I wasn't joking. He didn't know it yet, but I'd already set the first domino. And when it fell, it wouldn't make noise. It would just change everything. That weekend, I began to see the cracks form. Small things at first. Kyle's sudden nervousness whenever I entered a room. Melissa avoiding eye contact when bills came in. They didn't know what I'd done yet. I'd installed new monitoring software across our home network. Nothing illegal, just quiet observation. Every device that connected left a trail, and I was watching. By Sunday night, I had enough to understand what was happening. Kyle wasn't looking for work. He was reselling electronics online using my name as the registered shipper. Orders, invoices, shipping labels, all traced back to our address and my credit history. Melissa had to know. She was approving deliveries, signing for packages, pretending everything was fine. I didn't explode. I didn't even confront her. I copied every transaction, every timestamp, every tracking number. I created a private digital folder labeled proof. Then I went about my evening like any other husband would. Quiet, composed, unreadable. When Melissa came to bed that night, she asked if I was still angry about the money. I said no. I told her I understood now. That seemed to calm her. She even smiled, relieved. But what she didn't realize was that her relief told me everything I needed to know. She believed she'd already gotten away with it. On Monday morning, I called in a personal day. Melissa assumed I was just tired. She left with her coffee, kissed my cheek like nothing was wrong. I waited until she drove off, then printed the entire log of Kyle's transactions, along with screenshots of Melissa's email confirmations. The paper stack was thick, evidence layered like sediment. Around noon, I made another visit to the police department. I spoke to the same officer as before. He looked at the documents, then at me. His tone changed from casual to professional. He said this wasn't just identity misuse. It was active financial fraud, possibly a federal offense if the amounts were high enough. I nodded once, gave my statement, and left copies behind. When I got home, I didn't feel guilt. I felt control. For the first time in months, I wasn't reacting to chaos. I was directing it. That night, Melissa mentioned that Kyle's business was taking off and that he might finally move out soon. I smiled and said that would be great. In truth, he was already halfway out. He just didn't know it yet. By Wednesday morning, the police had already followed up. They didn't come to the house, just a phone call confirming they were opening a case. I gave them my work address for correspondence. I didn't want anything arriving at home. The officer's tone was careful, deliberate. They had traced 2 of the larger shipments to accounts under Kyle's name, but registered using my social security number. That was enough to escalate. When I hung up, I didn't feel satisfaction. I felt focus. Everything needed to happen quietly, in sequence. I wasn't just ending a freeloading situation. I was removing rot. That evening, I came home earlier than usual. Melissa was cooking, humming to herself like nothing had ever gone wrong. Kyle was in the living room, laughing into his phone, telling someone he'd made another sale. I sat at the table, listened, and waited for my moment. When he finally noticed me, the laughter stopped. He said I looked tired. I told him I was fine. Then I asked a simple question. If his business was going so well, when did he plan on moving out? He froze, then said that he and Melissa had discussed extending his stay until things stabilized. I just nodded. That was confirmation enough. Later that night, while they slept, I removed my personal files from the home computer, bank records, tax returns, employment documents. I wiped the hard drive clean and reinstalled the system. Everything else, every trace of their digital activity, remained untouched. I wanted the evidence to stay right where it was. By morning, I transferred my paycheck fully to the private account. Then I met with a real estate attorney during lunch. I told him I was considering selling the house and needed to clarify ownership status. He reviewed the documents and confirmed what I already knew. Melissa's name wasn't on the deed. The VA loan had been issued under mine alone. That detail felt like quiet armor. That night, I cooked dinner. It was the first time in weeks. Melissa looked surprised. She asked if we were good again. I said that we were fine, just needed space to reset. She smiled, maybe even believed it. Kyle joined us at the table, bragging about a new shipment coming in. I nodded politely, passing the salt. Inside, I was counting down hours. Because by Friday, his little empire would start collapsing, one notification at a time. Friday morning started like any other. Melissa left early, Kyle was still asleep, and I was halfway through my second cup of coffee when the first call came in. Unknown number. I let it ring out. A minute later, a text followed from the officer handling the case. The warrant had been approved. They'd be visiting Kyle that afternoon. I didn't respond, just stared at the message until the screen went dark. It wasn't joy I felt. It was precision, like watching a plan lock into place. By the time I left for work, Kyle was finally up, still in his robe, scrolling his phone. I told him calmly that I'd be home late and that I'd prefer the house be clean when I returned. He muttered something under his breath about me, acting like a landlord. I didn't correct him. He wasn't wrong. Around 2 p.m., my phone buzzed again. Another message from the officer. We've made contact. Items seized. Case proceeding. That was it. No details. Just confirmation. I finished the rest of the day pretending everything was normal. Meetings, emails, small talk. But underneath, a quiet current of focus kept me still. The calm before the inevitable call. When I got home that evening, the living room looked like a storm had passed through it. Boxes were overturned, cables hanging from the TV stand, and the front door was slightly ajar. Melissa was on the couch, her face pale, her hands shaking. She said the police had come with a warrant, taken Kyle's laptop, his phone, and some packages from the garage. They'd asked her questions. I listened without interrupting. When she finally stopped talking, I asked where Kyle was. She said he'd left with them. She asked if I knew anything about it. I told her the truth. I knew he'd been using my information. Her silence said everything. She hadn't just suspected it. She'd known. That night, she slept in the guest room. I didn't ask her to. She just couldn't look at me. When the house finally went quiet, I sat on the couch, the same place I'd slept weeks before. Except this time, I wasn't the one exiled. I was the one left standing. I thought about what the officer had said earlier, that cases like this often expose more than one person. I suspected he was right. By morning, I'd find out how deep it went. The next morning, I woke up to silence. The kind that settles after something's broken. Melissa's car was gone, her side of the closet half empty. No note. No message. Just absence. I stood there for a while, staring at the empty space where her clothes had been. It wasn't surprise I felt. It was confirmation. An hour later, my phone buzzed. Unknown number again. This time I answered. It was the officer. His tone was measured but heavier than before. He said Kyle had admitted to the online scheme, but there was more. Melissa's name had come up repeatedly. She'd been helping him move money through our joint account, claiming it was temporary storage for her brother's side business. The total amount laundered under my name was nearly $30,000. Enough for federal interest. I didn't interrupt him. He explained that I'd been cleared, my statements and documentation had matched perfectly with their findings. He thanked me for the precision of my records, said it made their job easier. When the call ended, I sat there in the quiet kitchen, letting the weight of it settle. By noon, Melissa texted me from an unknown number. It was short. She said she needed time, that she hadn't meant for it to go this far, that she'd only wanted to help her brother. She wrote that she hoped I could forgive her one day. I read it once and deleted it. Forgiveness wasn't on the list anymore. That evening, I went through the house room by room, removing every trace of them. Clothes, photos, small reminders of a family that had stopped being one long ago. I boxed it all and left it in the garage. The space felt lighter afterward, like I could finally breathe again. Around midnight, I received one last call from the officer. The case had officially moved to prosecution. Kyle was in custody, and Melissa had been questioned. There might be charges against her too. I said I understood. He thanked me again for cooperating and hung up. I turned off the lights, sat on the couch, and thought back to the night she told me to sleep there because I'd disrespected her brother. The same couch, the same man, but a different kind of silence now. Some people think justice is loud. But I'd learned the truth. The quiet kind lasts longer. 2 weeks passed before I saw Melissa again. She showed up unannounced one evening, standing on the porch with her hands buried in the pockets of her jacket. She looked smaller somehow, worn down. The confident tone she'd always carried was gone. She said she only wanted to pick up the rest of her things. I let her in without a word. She moved through the house quietly, pausing at the pictures that were still on the walls, the ones I hadn't taken down yet. Her eyes lingered on the wedding photo in the hallway, then on the living room, the couch, the table, the space that used to hold laughter. She whispered that she didn't know how things had gone so wrong. I said nothing. When she turned to leave, she said she was moving back in with her mother. Kyle had taken a plea deal. She might be called to testify. She said the prosecutors told her she could face charges too, depending on how much she knew. Then she asked the one question I'd been expecting since the night everything fell apart. She asked if I still loved her. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't look away. I told her that love isn't something you lose all at once. It fades in layers, like wallpaper peeled back until there's just the wall beneath. By the time I realized it was gone, the damage had already been done. She didn't argue. She just nodded once, picked up her box of clothes, and walked out the door. I watched her car pull away and disappear down the street. The house was silent again, but this time it didn't feel empty. It felt settled. The following month, the case wrapped up. Kyle was sentenced. Melissa avoided prison by cooperating fully. I sold the house, closed the joint accounts, and moved to a smaller place outside the city. Clean start. Sometimes, late at night, I think about that first argument, the night she told me to sleep on the couch, and think about how I treated her brother. I did think about it. And in the end, I realized she was right in a way. I did treat him too harshly, because I gave him silence instead of warning, precision instead of mercy. Now, when people ask if I'd ever take her back, I just smile and say the truth. Some lessons cost more than money. Some peace is paid for in quiet. Support the channel by liking, commenting, and subscribing. I promise even more interesting stories.